Introducing Audiobook Top, your new home for the finest selection of audiobooks available anywhere.
Welcome to Hook, the raw reality of the 18th century. Consider this stark truth, a chilling echo from the very heart of that brutal age. The life of a common sailor is a perpetual series of hardships, vexations, and dangers. His pay is often many months in arrears, his food unpalatable and unwholesome, and his very existence dependent on the caprice of a captain or a tyrannical superior. This, dear listener, is not the polite, gossiping England of Jane Austen. Cast aside, if you will, the meticulously arranged balls, the witty drawing room repartee, the carefully calibrated marriage proposals exchanged over delicate teacups. Put aside your notions of decorum, of refined sensibilities, and gentle moral dilemmas. Here, there are no swooning heroines contemplating eligible bachelors from their chaise lounges. Here, there is only the brutal, unvarnished grind of survival in a world utterly indifferent to your comfort, your dignity, or even your very life. We are about to plunge headfirst into the chaotic, disease-ridden, and often utterly barbaric landscape of Tobias Smollett's 18th century. Imagine a world where the streets teem with rogues and beggars, where grog-soaked taverns are dens of vice and fortune is lost in an instant, where back alleys conceal press gangs ready to snatch any able-bodied man into involuntary naval service. Envision ships where scurvy, typhus, and the lash of a cat o' nine tails are as common and expected as the biting salt spray. It is an age where doctors are often quacks, lawyers are swindlers, and any semblance of charity is a rare, fleeting illusion. Every interaction, every journey, every meal is a potential pitfall, a test of endurance against overwhelming odds. And into this seething maelstrom, we cast our hero, Roderick Random. He is no paragon of virtue, no shining knight in search of a moral quest or a virtuous lady to rescue. Roderick is a man forged in the crucible of ceaseless adversity, driven by a raw, unyielding ambition to carve out a place for himself in a society seemingly determined to crush him at every turn. He will lie, he will bluff, he will scheme, and he will fight with a tenacity born of desperation. His triumphs, when they come, are not won through inherent goodness or noble lineage, but through sheer, audacious wit, an unbreakable spirit, and a remarkable, almost stubborn, resilience in the face of relentless misfortune. Prepare yourselves for a journey where fortune is fickle, justice is scarce, and the most compelling drama unfolds not in stately homes and hushed parlors, but in the grime and clamor of the common man's struggle for existence. This is the unvarnished truth, painted with a brush dipped in both biting satire and the very blood of human experience. Get ready to meet Roderick Random, a hero perfectly suited for a truly savage, yet undeniably captivating age. To truly understand the extraordinary odyssey of Roderick Random, we must first look to the man who created him, Tobias Smollett. Born in 1721, Smollett was no detached observer. His most formative years were spent as a naval surgeon, a brutal apprenticeship on the lower decks of His Majesty's ships. Imagine the stench of the sickbay, the cries of the wounded, the grim stoicism of men facing disease and cannon fire. He witnessed humanity at its most desperate and resilient, the harsh hierarchies, the casual cruelty, and the rare kindness that flourished in such a crucible. This first-hand knowledge of naval life, of poverty, illness, and the complex web of human vice and virtue became the bedrock of Roderick's adventures, infusing every page with unflinching authenticity. This deep well of experience anchors the adventures of Roderick Random firmly within the tradition of the Picaresque novel. The Picaresque follows the episodic wanderings of a picaro, a rogue hero, typically of low social standing, surviving by wit and cunning as he navigates a corrupt and hostile world. Our Picaro is not a noble knight, but a resourceful survivor, constantly tossed about by fate, struggling against a society riddled with hypocrisy, snobbery, and injustice. Through his eyes, Smollett holds up a stark mirror to the age, reflecting its absurdities and cruelties. And so we meet Roderick Random, our Picaro, our guide. As the teller of this tale, I promise an account both sympathetic and brutally honest. I hold no illusions about the world young Roderick inhabits, nor the man he becomes. You will find me understanding of the crushing weight of circumstance, perhaps even forgiving of his youthful follies. Yet, I will not gloss over his impulsive errors, his moments of pride, or where his inexperience and hot temper lead him astray. I will ask you to feel the sting of his misfortunes, to laugh at the absurdities, and occasionally wince at his less noble actions. For Roderick's journey, in all its chaotic, unseemly glory, is a profound exploration of human endurance, resilience, and the relentless quest for a place in a world determined to deny it. Come, let us begin his extraordinary, unforgiving voyage. From the very first breath Roderick drew, it was clear his destiny was to be a battle fought against the relentless tide of misfortune. Indeed, he was, quite literally, born under a bad sign, a harbinger of the trials that would define his extraordinary, often harrowing, life. His father, a young man of gentle disposition but little worldly wisdom, had dared to defy the rigid dictates of his own father, Sir Roderick Random, a judge of formidable wealth and even more formidable pride. This elder Random, a man whose avarice was matched only by his vanity, had envisioned a match of grand fortune for his heir. But youth, as it often does, followed its heart. Roderick's father fell deeply in love with a lady of exquisite beauty and impeccable virtue, but, alas, of no worldly possessions. Their union, born of genuine affection, was a secret affair, conducted with a furtive haste that bespoke the certain wrath awaiting its discovery. And wrath, indeed it was. When Sir Roderick, the patriarch, uncovered this clandestine marriage, his fury knew no bounds. He, who prized status and wealth above all else, saw his son's choice not merely as an act of rebellion, but as a public affront to his own esteemed reputation. The young man was instantly disinherited, cast out from the family estate with a chilling finality. Forced into the king's service, Roderick's father was swept away by the brutal currents of war, vanishing without a trace, presumed lost to the cruel theater of battle, leaving his young bride utterly destitute and heartbroken. The burden of this rejection, coupled with the profound absence of her beloved husband, proved too heavy for Roderick's mother. Withered by grief and the harsh realities of abandonment, she faded rapidly, giving birth to Roderick amidst her own decline, only to surrender her spirit to the eternal slumber shortly thereafter. Thus, within mere months of his arrival, Roderick was an orphan, his mother a memory, his father a ghost. And what of his illustrious grandfather, the powerful Judge Random? He whose coffers overflowed with gold, whose influence stretched far and wide, remained unmoved by the tragic outcome of his own merciless decree. Roderick, the helpless infant, was seen not as a grandchild worthy of solace or compassion, but as a living, breathing emblem of his son's perceived folly, a constant, inconvenient reminder of a blot on the family escutcheon. The old judge, calculating and self-serving, grudgingly acknowledged the child's existence, but only to avoid the scandal of outright neglect. He provided the barest minimum for Roderick's upkeep, a pittance dispensed with a cold, resentful hand, motivated purely by a desire to preserve his public image rather than any flicker of familial affection. Roderick's fate, it seemed, was to be endured rather than embraced, a burden rather than a blessing, a solitary journey already marked by profound loss and a chilling rejection from the very blood that flowed in his veins. Chapter 2. The schoolboy's struggle. Our young Roderick, now placed under the tutelage of a certain Mr. Crabbe, a man whose very name seemed to foretell his disposition, found himself plunged into a world far removed from the idyllic innocence of childhood. This school, rather than a nurturing ground for young minds, was a crucible of fear and arbitrary power. Mr. Crabbe, a pedagogue of the old, brutal school, wielded his authority with an iron fist, his temper as volatile as the Scottish weather. For Roderick, devoid of the shield of influential parents or doting relatives, every infraction, real or imagined, was met with a severity unmatched for his more privileged peers. His grandmother, though she had seen him placed, offered no protection, her involvement ceasing at the schoolhouse door, leaving him utterly exposed to the master's caprice. He was in essence an orphan of society, his very existence a burden, and his treatment a reflection of his perceived worth. Yet even amidst this relentless oppression, Roderick's innate brilliance could not be stifled. He devoured knowledge with an insatiable hunger, his sharp intellect quickly grasping concepts that eluded his classmates. He shone brightest in Latin and Greek, his translations and compositions often far surpassing those of boys whose fathers were prominent gentry. This intellectual merit, however, instead of earning him praise, often served only to exacerbate his plight. Mr. Crabbe, perhaps subconsciously resentful of a poor boy outshining his wealthier charges, would frequently attribute Roderick's successes to sheer luck or even plagiarism, preferring to extol the middling efforts of those born to status and fortune. It was a harsh early lesson for Roderick that in this world, inherited status often trumped genuine talent. It was this very injustice, this constant struggle against an unfair system, that began to forge Roderick's formidable wit. He learned to observe, to analyze, and to articulate his observations with a cutting precision. His anger, rather than consuming him, began to transmute into a sharper intellect, a keen eye for hypocrisy and absurdity. One day, after suffering a particularly egregious caning for a fault committed by another, Roderick, in a quiet moment, penned a series of verses. These lines, sharp as a surgeon's scalpel, lampooned Mr. Crabbe's tyrannical habits, his pompous pronouncements, and his glaring favoritism. He described the master as a bipedal scourge, whose knowledge of the rod outstripped the Latin word. The satirical poem, circulated furtively among his fellow sufferers, brought forth furtive smiles and hushed admiration, a small spark of rebellion in the dreary institution. Inevitably, the verses found their way to Mr. Crabbe's desk. The ensuing storm was legendary. Roderick faced the full fury of his master, his back bearing the brunt of the cane. His spirit, however, remained unbowed. The punishment, though severe, only solidified his conviction that wit, even in the face of tyranny, was a potent, if perilous, weapon. He had tasted the power of his words, the sting they could inflict, and the solidarity they could inspire. Thus, the schoolboy's struggle, while physically punishing, became the forge where Roderick's intelligence was sharpened, his satirical voice found, and his understanding of the world's cruelties deepened, preparing him, though he knew it not, for the greater adventures that lay ahead. Chapter 3. Enter Hugh Strap. The expulsion from his uncle's house, the unjust accusations, and the subsequent dismissal from his apprenticeship had left young Roderick Random adrift, utterly destitute and alone. With pockets empty and a heart heavy with indignation, he knew not where to turn. It was in this profound moment of despair that a humble figure emerged, a shadow stepping forward from the periphery of his life, yet one destined to become an unwavering anchor. This was Hugh Strap, a barber's apprentice under the same surgeon apothecary who had reluctantly taken Roderick on. Strap was a youth of meager stature, with a perpetually earnest expression and a natural inclination towards deference. His clothes were threadbare, his hands accustomed to the razor and lather, but his spirit was pure, uncomplicated, and fiercely loyal. Though Roderick, by birth, belonged to a higher station, a gentleman fallen on hard times, Strap saw in him not just a fellow apprentice, but a figure of inherent superiority, deserving of every respect. "Master Random," Strap began, his voice a soft murmur of genuine concern, "I hear tell of your misfortune. My heart aches for your plight." He fidgeted, then, with surprising resolution, continued, "I have saved a few shillings, sir, from my meager earnings. If you would but accept, they are yours. And more, I would follow you to the ends of the earth, if you but permit me." Roderick, accustomed to a world that had lately offered only scorn and betrayal, was profoundly moved. This simple act of unsolicited kindness, from one so much his social inferior, pierced through his hardened shell. He accepted Strap's offer, not without a subtle awareness of the chasm in their social standing, yet with a burgeoning sense of gratitude for this genuine devotion. To London, then, Strap, Roderick declared, a flicker of his old ambition reigniting. "The great city, where fortunes are made and lost. We shall seek ours there." Strap's face lit up with unreserved enthusiasm, mirroring Roderick's own rekindled hope. "Aye, Master Random, London it shall be, and together we shall conquer it." With no money for stagecoaches or horses, their only option was the open road. The decision was made with a shared, desperate optimism. They would walk, two young men, one a gentleman by birth, the other a barber's boy by trade, but now bound by a common adversity and an unlikely friendship. They set off, their few belongings bundled, their footsteps echoing the fragile hopes of adventurers embarking on the grand, perilous journey to find their place in a vast, indifferent world. The road to London lay long and uncertain before them, but for the first time in days, Roderick felt a companion at his side, a steadfast heart to match his own. Chapter 4. The road to London. The morning sun, though hesitant, lit their path as Roderick and Strap, hearts full of buoyant expectation, set their faces towards London. The grand metropolis, a beacon of adventure, shimmered in their youthful imaginations. Strap chirped of fortunes, Roderick of romantic notions. The road, however, had other lessons to impart. Their innocence was brutally assaulted just days in. As dusk cloaked the trees, a guttural roar, "Stand and deliver, you scurvy knaves." Masked figures on horseback materialized, pistols glinting. Roderick's heart hammered, poor Strap stammered, "Oh good sir, we've scarce a penny!" Unswayed, the highwaymen snatched their meager funds, leaving bitter fear. "Consider yourselves lucky lads!" One growled, vanishing, leaving them shivering, optimism bruised. Later, at a bustling inn, they met a different plunder. The innkeeper, with a suspiciously genial smile, clapped Strap's shoulder. "Welcome, gentlemen. A fine room and supper fit for kings awaits!" Only the best for travelers of your distinction." He spoke of plump chickens, but the meal was meager, the ale watery. The bill, robust for the grand room, royal supper, and incomparable service, a shilling and sixpence. "Gentlemen," he announced, eyes twinkling. Roderick eyed him suspiciously, but Strap, trusting, fumbled for coins, muttering, "A bit dear, perhaps, but such is the cost of comfort." Their journey brought more trials. At another stop, a grizzled old man with a knowing smirk regaled them with tales of his unbeatable card game. "Just a bit of fun, young uns," he croaked, shuffling. "Test your wits, eh?" Roderick felt unease, but Strap, dreaming of reclaiming lost coin, eagerly offered his last few pence. Predictably, they lost. The old man collected their stake with a dry chuckle. "Better luck next time, boys," he called, leaving them poorer and wiser. The road to London, they discovered, was not paved with gold but fraught with cunning. Each encounter chipped away at their youthful idealism, replacing it with a hard-won understanding of the world's less savory inhabitants. Their initial belief in good gave way to cautious apprehension. London, once a shining city of dreams, now took on a formidable hue. They were no longer merely travelers. They were survivors, shedding naivety, tempered by harsh experience, learning the true cost of navigating a perilous world. London awaited, but they now approached it not with blind hope, but with wary readiness. Chapter 5: The London Jungle. The journey to the metropolis, though long and arduous, had been fueled by a potent elixir of youthful optimism, a fervent belief that London, the heart of the empire, would prove a welcoming haven for talent and ambition. But the reality that greeted young Roderick Random was a stark, bewildering assault on every sense. As his coach rumbled over the cobblestones, the city unfurled itself not as a gleaming beacon of opportunity, but as a monstrous, roaring beast. The air itself seemed to crackle with cacophony shrill vendors' cries, the clatter of countless hooves and carriage wheels grinding through the mire, human voices merging into an overwhelming roar. Above this din, a foul miasma hung thick, a blend of coal smoke, uncollected refuse, and the raw stench of 1,000 lives. The grand avenues he had envisioned were narrow, choked arteries, buildings grimed with soot and indifference, gutters overflowing with nameless filth. This was no gentle garden, but a teeming, relentless jungle. Armed with what he hoped were compelling letters and the faint ties of distant kinship, Roderick began his quest for patronage. His initial calls were hopeful, approaching the stately doors of relatives whose names promised influence. He would wait, sometimes for hours, in opulent antechambers, only to be met by supercilious servants and, eventually, by the cold, dismissive gazes of those he hoped would offer succor. One formidable great-aunt, swathed in silk and disdain, barely glanced at his letter, pronouncing his presence an inconvenience, a tiresome reminder of forgotten family branches. Another distant cousin, a man of considerable fortune, granted a brief, perfunctory interview, offering only a patronizing nod and the assurance that London is difficult for young men without court connections. The warmth of family, he quickly learned, did not extend to actual need. Each rejection chipped away at his fragile confidence. His provincial accent now felt like a brand of inadequacy. Yet, stubbornly, he clung to the notion that his appearance might be at fault. With dwindling funds, he made desperate investments to signal respectability: a new, modest wig, a costly, superficial repair to his threadbare coat, a sword, purchased at a considerable fraction of his remaining purse, meant to lend him consequence. These meager expenditures devoured his precious capital with alarming speed. Each shilling spent was a shilling less for food and lodging, yet his efforts proved utterly futile. The polished wig and mended coat did nothing to alter the cold calculation in the eyes of the wealthy, nor did his new sword soften the hearts of those who saw him only as another supplicant. Roderick found himself adrift in London, his hopes, once brightly burning, now reduced to smoldering embers against encroaching despair. The London he dreamt of was a mirage, replaced by a harsh reality where family ties frayed under ambition, and a young man's worth was measured not by character, but by fortune. Chapter 6: The Medical Examination. And so, Roderick, buoyed by the promise of employment, found himself at the Navy office, ushered into a chamber that reeked faintly of dust and stale ink. Before him sat a triumvirate of men, each sporting an air of self-importance that seemed to inflate their already considerable girths. These, he was informed, were the esteemed examiners tasked with gauging his fitness as a surgeon's mate for His Majesty's service. The first, a man whose florid complexion suggested a closer acquaintance with the wine merchant than with the human circulatory system, began with a question delivered with an almost theatrical flourish. He demanded Roderick expound upon the precise nature of the asterisk causi continentis asterisk in a case of pleurisy, citing obscure classical texts as his sole authority. Roderick, who had diligently studied modern anatomy and practical medicine, felt a familiar wave of frustration. He responded, not with a recitation of ancient dogma, but with a concise, sensible explanation rooted in observable symptoms and contemporary understanding of inflammation. A second examiner, whose spectacles were perched precariously on his nose, squinted at Roderick with undisguised suspicion. He then challenged him on the efficacy of phlebotomy for almost every conceivable ailment, advocating for bleeding with an enthusiasm that would terrify even the most robust constitution. Roderick, understanding the evolving views on such practices, cautiously suggested instances where its benefits were dubious and even detrimental. The examiner merely grunted, scribbling something illegible on a parchment, a gesture that spoke volumes of his disdain for innovative thought. The third and final inquisitor, a portly fellow with a perpetually raised eyebrow, decided to test Roderick on his Latin. He rattled off an obscure passage, expecting a flawless translation of some arcane medical theory. Roderick, though competent in Latin, found himself struggling not with the language, but with the utter irrelevance of the passage to any actual medical practice. He provided a passable translation, though his internal monologue questioned the sanity of men who prized dead languages over saving living souls. It became abundantly clear to Roderick that his actual skill, his demonstrable knowledge of anatomy, surgery, and practical patient care, held little sway with these men. They were not seeking competence, they were seeking conformity to outdated doctrines, a readiness to parrot their own entrenched fallacies, and a reverence for the archaic. His sensible, modern answers were met with blank stares or worse, thinly veiled contempt. He was, in their eyes, too practical, too unburdened by the very prejudices that cemented their authority. He observed them exchanging knowing glances, a silent agreement that this young man, despite his evident cleverness, simply did not fit their mold. Yet, with a sigh that was almost audible, they grudgingly declared him qualified, perhaps more out of exhaustion from his unwavering logic than from any genuine conviction in his abilities. Roderick had passed, not by their grace, but almost in spite of their ingrained incompetence, a stark testament to the arbitrary whims governing a profession so vital to life itself. Chapter 7. Press ganged. The sun, though long set, still warmed the stones of London streets with a faint, lingering heat. Roderick, his thoughts lost somewhere between his empty pockets and the next uncertain meal, lingered near the docks, a place where the city's rougher pulse beat with a desperate rhythm. There was no warning, no shouted demand, only the sudden, overwhelming force of hands seizing him from behind, and a heavy, stunning blow to the back of his head. He gasped, stumbling, arms flailing uselessly as he was dragged roughly, feet scraping against the cobblestones. The attackers, burly figures in the gloom, moved with brutal, practiced efficiency, their faces grim, their eyes devoid of mercy. Fists rained down, a sharp jab to the ribs left him breathless, reeling. His desperate attempts to resist were met with more violence, until he was physically incapacitated, a grim understanding dawning that he was utterly outnumbered. He was merely a body, another warm form to be pressed into unwilling service. His frantic struggles ceased from sheer shock. He was lifted, hoisted like a sack of grain, and thrown unceremoniously into the back of a waiting cart, the jolting impact sending a fresh wave of pain through his battered frame. The journey, though short, was an agonizing blur of bumps and lurches, each a cruel reminder. When the cart halted, he was pulled out and shoved down slick, grimy steps into a chamber where the very air seemed to weep. It was a holding cell, or more accurately, a pit of despair. The darkness was absolute, save for a single flickering lantern casting monstrous shadows on walls caked with grime. The stench was immediate and overwhelming, a noxious cocktail of stale sweat, unwashed bodies, human waste, and the damp, metallic tang of fear. Other men, their faces gaunt and eyes hollow, huddled in various states of dejection on the sodden floor, their silent misery a palpable weight. Roderick stumbled, pushed into a corner amidst the shivering, defeated mass. The floor was cold, slimy beneath his hands. The stone walls exuded a chilling dampness that seeped into his bones. Hope, a fragile spark, was utterly extinguished by the suffocating reality. Here, in this wretched hole, stripped of dignity and freedom, Roderick truly understood his misfortune. There was no appeal, no recourse to justice, no friendly face. His life, only moments ago his own, however humble, was now entirely forfeit. He was merely a commodity, a body stolen from the streets to fill a quota, to man a ship, to serve a purpose not of his choosing. His future, always uncertain, was now grimly, terrifyingly clear, a life of brutal discipline, constant danger, and ceaseless toil on the unforgiving sea. The very notion of choice, of personal will, had been violently ripped from him. He was a prisoner, not just of these walls, but of a monstrous system that devoured men whole, extinguishing their individual flames and remaking them into cogs in a vast, indifferent machine. His identity, his aspirations, his very name seemed to dissolve in the face of this utter, absolute powerlessness. He was Roderick Random no longer, but merely another victim, condemned to a fate he could neither escape nor alter. Chapter 8: Life on the Thunder. And so, Roderick Random found himself aboard the Thunder, a 70-gun man of war, a suffocating prison. The ship's brutal hierarchy unfurled, absolute and unyielding. This was no ship of grand adventure, it was a confined, grim microcosm where dignity was a forgotten word, and every man knew his place, however miserable. At its grim apex stood Captain Oakham. His very name seemed to crackle with severity, his authority absolute, enforced with a swift, brutal discipline that left men scarred, both physically and spiritually. To cross him, even inadvertently, was to invite a torment that could make one long for any release. Beneath Oakham, a more insidious tyranny flourished Dr. McShane, the ship's surgeon. Of conspicuously limited medical skill but boundless, almost gleeful, cruelty, McShane found particular sport in others' suffering, a true sadist in a surgeon's coat. His breath often reeked, his temper a sudden squall at sea. Roderick, by cruel fate, became Loblolaboy, the surgeon's assistant. A position of profound indignity, demanding tasks from fetching instruments to cleaning after gruesome operations, tending the truly wretched, the dying, the diseased, the maimed. The very air below deck was a foul, stagnant concoction of tar, bilge, unwashed bodies, and the ever-present stench of fear and sickness. Daylight was a precious, almost forgotten luxury, replaced by the flickering, greasy glow of oil lamps, deepening the pervasive claustrophobia. Men were packed like sardines, their hammocks brushing, their bodies often pressed against the damp, sweating timbers of the hull. Privacy was a cruel joke, comfort an utterly alien concept. Disease, a silent, relentless passenger, made its home in these unsanitary spaces, taking its terrible toll without mercy or distinction. For a young man schooled in Latin and Greek, with a keen intellect and once bright aspirations of a professional life, this precipitous descent was a particularly bitter draught indeed. Exchanging academic pursuits for the ignoble, often repulsive duties of a loblolly boy, witnessing daily human suffering and depravity, while his own mind yearned for knowledge and refinement, was a profound and constant humiliation. He was a scholar trapped in a sewer, a gentleman forced to perform the most ungentlemanly of tasks, his education now a cruel irony in this brutal, unforgiving world. Chapter 9. The sick berth. The ship, a floating prison of misery, bore us onward, but it was in the sick berth that the very soul of suffering found its most wretched habitation. Here humanity was stripped bare, not merely of dignity, but of any semblance of comfort or care. It was a space, if one could even call it that, perpetually shrouded in a clammy gloom, permeated by the sickening cocktail of unwashed bodies, stale vomit, and the acrid tang of despair. Ventilation was a cruel jest, the air hung thick and heavy, a visible miasma clinging to every damp plank and groaning timber. Men lay crammed together, often 3 or 4 to a bunk, their fevered bodies pressed against one another, shivering or burning in turns. There were no clean sheets, only stained, stiffened rags that served as a grotesque monument to past afflictions. Bandages, when they existed, were often reused, caked with pus and dried blood, spreading rather than stemming infection. Supplies, the very tools of healing, were either non-existent or of such poor quality as to be worse than useless. Even clean water, the simplest balm, was a precious rarity, doled out with grudging parsimony. Into this inferno stepped the ship's doctor, a man whose medical knowledge seemed to have been gleaned from the darkest ages of superstition. His treatments were a horrifying spectacle of barbarity. I watched, my stomach turning, as men, already weakened by scurvy or consumption, were subjected to prodigious bleedings, their dwindling life force drained away by the pint, leaving them ghostly pale and teetering on the precipice of oblivion. Purges were administered with a heavy hand, violent concoctions that racked the gut and brought forth torrents of bile, mistaking exhaustion for cure. Blistering plasters, searing patches applied to delicate skin, caused agony that drowned out the original complaint. His surgical instruments, few and often rusty, were wielded with a terrifying indifference to pain, the cries of the suffering drowned out by the creaking of the ship and the callous laughter of his assistants. It was clear these weren't attempts at healing, but ritualistic tortures, the sick a captive audience to their own slow demise. Amidst this squalor and unfeeling cruelty, my own heart ached with a profound sense of injustice. I was but a junior, yet I possessed enough education to recognize the criminal neglect, the utter lack of humanity. It was then, in the dim, fetid confines of that sick berth, that I first truly encountered Morgan. He was a surgeon's mate, a Welshman of a fiery temperament and a surprising depth of compassion, often forced to assist in these very treatments that he clearly despised. Our eyes met across a groaning form, a shared look of helpless outrage passing between us. He had a brusque exterior, a manner hardened by years of naval service, but beneath it simmered a decent, indignant spirit. We were both witnesses, both victims in a sense, of the tyranny of ignorance and power. In that moment of shared despair, a fragile, unspoken alliance began to form, a bond between two souls who recognized a common enemy in the brutal, indifferent system that governed our lives at sea. Chapter 10: The Battle of Cartagena. The scorching sun beat down on the Caribbean Sea and on the very souls of those who sailed towards Cartagena. What began as a grand armada, billowing with ambition, quickly descended into a grim testament to hubris. This was no mere engagement, it was a devastating lesson in military incompetence. The initial bombardments were a terrifying symphony of destruction. Incessant cannon fire ripped through the air, tearing apart fortifications and flesh. Ships poured forth their deadly payloads, shell after shell shrieking into the city, reducing stone to rubble and countless lives to statistics. Yet, amidst this power, there was profound, horrifying futility. Men were thrown against impregnable defenses, their courage wasted in futile sacrifice. Disease, more insidious than any cannon, decimated ranks even before shore, a silent slaughter underscoring tragic unpreparedness. Who orchestrated this calamitous ballet of death? Commanders whose towering egos overshadowed all tactical acumen. Admiral Vernon, inflated by Portobello's success, now seemed paralyzed by indecision, blinded by his own infallible judgment. General Wentworth, his land commander, proved an equally disastrous foil, timid, then rash, utterly incapable of cooperation. Their squabbles, jealousies, and refusal to coordinate created a leadership vacuum that swallowed thousands. Objectives shifted with their pride, leaving soldiers bewildered, exposed, sacrificed not to the enemy, but to their leader's vanity. The aftermath was unmitigated horror. The ground, slick with mud and blood, was littered with dismembered limbs and broken bodies. The air hung thick with gunpowder, decay, and despair. Groans of the dying mingled with frantic cries of the wounded, desperate for water, for mercy, for an end. Makeshift hospitals became charnel houses. Overwhelmed by suffering, grim surgeons performed crude amputations amidst swarms of flies. Survivors, gaunt and hollow-eyed, bore not battle's pride, but the vacant stare of those who had witnessed hell, their bodies racked by fever and dysentery, their spirits broken by its senselessness. Cartagena, unconquered, stood a monument to their collective folly, a vast, open grave for British ambition. Chapter 11: Shipwreck and Survival. The very heavens seemed to conspire against us, twisting into a maelstrom of impenetrable black. A tempest, unlike any I had ever witnessed, descended with a primordial fury that deafened the very air, stealing our cries before they could reach our lips. The wind, a monstrous, ravenous roar, tore at the sails, shredding them to pathetic ribbons, while mountainous waves, black and menacing as the maw of some primeval beast, rose from the deep to swallow our vessel whole. The good ship, once a sturdy marvel of human ingenuity, became a mere plaything of the merciless ocean, groaning and creaking with every agonizing lurch, every sickening plunge. Timber shrieked as if in agony, the mast splintered with a sound like 1,000 thunders, and then, with a final, heart-stopping crack that echoed the shattering of our hopes, the mighty vessel was ripped asunder. Cries of despair, sharp and raw, mingled with the gale's shriek as men, women, and cargo alike were hurled indiscriminately into the churning abyss. I remember the icy, visceral shock of the water, the overwhelming darkness that pressed in from every side, the desperate, clawing struggle for breath as the ocean dragged me down, then spat me up, only to drag me down again with relentless, teasing cruelty. My lungs burned, my limbs ached with a profound, terrifying fatigue, yet some primal instinct, some desperate spark of life, refused to yield. For what seemed an eternity, a lifetime compressed into mere moments, I was at the mercy of the current, battered and bruised, tumbled and churned, until, with a final, tremendous heave, the sea relinquished its suffocating hold. I felt the unforgiving crunch of shingle beneath me, then nothing but the thunderous roar of the waves and the searing, aching pain in my chest. I lay there gasping, half drowned, my senses slowly, painfully returning, only to find myself utterly alone utterly naked, stripped of every possession, every comfort, every shred of dignity, save the fragile, precious breath in my battered body. The salt burned my eyes, but I forced them open to survey the desolate, alien shore. But even as I rejoiced at escaping the watery grave, a colder, more chilling dread began to creep in, chilling me to the very bone. Shadowy figures, like vultures drawn to fresh carrion, emerged from the gloom of the storm-lashed shore. They were not rescuers, they were wreckers. With a horrifying lack of compassion, they descended upon the scattered flotsam, upon the lifeless forms washing in with the tide, and, to my utter horror, upon the few of us who still clung to the precious thread of life. With callous efficiency, they stripped the dead of their last garments, their rings, their precious trinkets, rifling through pockets with an almost practiced nonchalance. And then their avaricious gaze, sharp and cold, turned upon me, upon my fellow survivors. There was no word of comfort, no offer of aid, only grasping hands tearing away what little remained. My sodden clothes, my meager sea chest, even the very buckle from my shoe, all were plundered with a chilling brutality that eclipsed even the storm's fury. To have cheated death by the ocean's monstrous hand, only to be robbed of humanity's grace by the very land I had yearned for, was a betrayal that pierced deeper than any tempest, leaving me bereft and utterly despairing. Chapter 12, Service in Sussex. And so, Roderick, ever buffeted by fortune's cruel hand, found himself once more cast into the maelstrom of domestic service, this time in the verdant, yet strangely stifling, climes of Sussex. His new mistress, a certain Lady W., was a formidable bastion of rural eccentricity, her domain a rambling, ancient manor house that seemed to sigh with generations of forgotten dust and peculiar habits. The house itself was a museum of faded grandeur and overt clutter. Every surface groaned under the weight of porcelain figurines, intricate tapestries depicting hunting scenes long out of fashion, and an alarming collection of stuffed birds with glassy, unblinking eyes. Lady W., a widow of indeterminate age but decided opinions, presided over this tableau with an air of imperious self-satisfaction. Her days were meticulously scheduled around trivialities, the exact brewing of her morning tea, the precise arrangement of her lapdogs on the settee, and the endless, intricate dances of village gossip, relayed to her by a succession of equally peculiar dependents. For Roderick, a young man of spirit and education, the transition to footman was a bitter pill indeed. His uniform, a livery of garish green and gold, felt less like attire and more like a visible brand of his ignominious descent. He who had once conversed in Latin and dreamed of maritime glory, now found his hands occupied with the polishing of silver, the emptying of chamber pots, and the arduous task of enduring Lady W's endless, nonsensical directives. He would stand for hours, a mute sentinel, while his mistress recounted dreary tales of her ancestors' minor ailments, or dissected the supposed moral failings of a distant cousin. His intellect chafed under the yoke of such triviality, his pride smarting with every menial task. This household, and indeed the entire social sphere it inhabited, was a microcosm of rural gentry life, exposed in all its vapid glory. Here status was paramount, maintained through a delicate ballet of inherited wealth and inherited snobbery. Conversation revolved around the mundane, the price of oats, the latest bonnet from London, or the scandalous elopement of a squire's daughter, dissected with a ferocity usually reserved for matters of national import. The servants, including Roderick, were but cogs in this elaborate, self-serving machine, invisible yet indispensable, their presence a silent testament to the wealth and idleness of their masters. Roderick observed it all with a mordant wit, seeing through the thin veneer of gentility to the boredom and petty tyranny beneath, his humiliation tempered only by the sharp edge of his satirical eye. Chapter 13, Crossing to France. And so, with England's shores receding into the mist-shrouded horizon, Roderick found himself truly at the mercy of the vast, indifferent ocean and the even vaster, more indifferent world beyond. The Channel crossing was a tumultuous affair, mirroring perhaps the tempest brewing within his own breast, a blend of desperate hope and profound uncertainty. Each wave that slapped against the vessel's hull seemed to propel him further from all that was familiar, towards a destiny utterly unknown. When the French coast at last materialized, a low, gray smudge against the dawn, it brought with it not the anticipated warmth of welcome, but an immediate and jarring jolt of otherness. Calais, with its bustling quays and unfamiliar architecture, assaulted his senses. A bewildering babel of tongues assailed his ears, a rapid-fire cadence utterly alien to his Scottish sensibilities. The people, in their brightly colored and often flamboyant attire, gestured with an animation that seemed almost theatrical. their very expressions a language he could not decipher. Every custom, every smell, every sound was a stark reminder that he was no longer among his own. He was an outsider, a bewildered spectator in a foreign theater. The coarse bread, the thin wine, the curious manners all conspired to deepen his sense of alienation, turning what might have been an adventure into an immediate ordeal of culture shock. But the pangs of novelty soon gave way to the more urgent gnaw of hunger. With his purse grown tragically light, and no friendly face or familiar trade to turn to, survival quickly eclipsed mere observation. It was in this moment of stark desperation that the distant beat of a drum and the sight of smartly uniformed soldiers caught his eye. A recruiter, with a glib smile and a ready offer of food, lodging, and a few paltry coins, presented him with a choice that was no choice at all. And so, with a grim acceptance of his fate, Roderick, a Scotsman by birth and upbringing, found himself taking the king's shilling, not for his own monarch, but for the King of France. To stand now, a recruit in the French army, clad in their distinctive uniform, was a bitter, almost comical irony. He, Roderick Random, who had known nothing but the soil and spirit of Britain, was now pledged to a cause that might well see him arrayed against his own countrymen. It was an absurdity of the highest order, a grotesque twist of fate that stripped away all notions of patriotism and loyalty, leaving only the raw, stark imperative of staying alive. He was a soldier, not by conviction or principle, but by the sheer, unyielding demand of his stomach, a mercenary in all but name, fighting for a country that was not his own, for a king he knew nothing of, simply to endure another day. What new perils, what fresh indignities, would this bizarre allegiance bring? Only time and the merciless march of circumstance would tell. Chapter 14. The fortune hunter, upon his return to the tumultuous embrace of London, Roderick, having tasted the bitter fruits of poverty and the fleeting sweetness of patronage, found his sensibilities sharpened by a new, unwavering resolve. No longer would he trust to the whims of chance or the fickle hearts of benefactors. His path, he decided, would be paved with gold, acquired through the most ancient and venerable of means, a judicious marriage. Strap, ever the faithful shadow, though now a somewhat thinner purse, listened with a mixture of awe and trepidation as Roderick unfolded his grand design. "My dear Strap," Roderick declared, his eyes gleaming with a newfound, almost predatory ambition, "we shall elevate ourselves. We shall seek not affection but assets. Our target, my friend, is a wealthy heiress, a woman whose fortune alone can redeem our current ignominious state." Strap, after a series of nervous twitches and a profound sigh, reluctantly agreed to once more delve into his meager savings, a fund painfully amassed, to provide Roderick with the necessary trappings of a gentleman on the make. Thus began Roderick's campaign, a masterclass in calculated charm and cynical pragmatism. He frequented the public assemblies, the fashionable promenades, and the bustling coffee houses, not with an eye for beauty, but for balance sheets. His gaze swept past the youthful visages and lingered instead on those whose age or plainness might be compensated by the undeniable gleam of inherited wealth. He became a connoisseur of dowries, a connoisseur of rent rolls, rather than of complexions. His compliments, though delivered with impeccable suavity, were less about the lady's radiant eyes and more about the perceived vastness of her estates. He adopted a melancholic air, hinting at a tragic past and a sensitive soul, a sure bait for the susceptible, particularly those of a certain age who yearned for a romantic rescue. He would sigh profoundly over a cup of tea, lament the transient nature of earthly delights, all while secretly calculating the interest on her capital. Every gesture, every carefully chosen phrase, was part of a meticulously constructed performance. He borrowed a suitably elegant wig from a struggling actor, practiced his most engaging smiles before a cracked mirror, and committed to memory a repertoire of fashionable small talk that could be deployed with surgical precision. Strap, meanwhile, was tasked with the less glamorous duties, laundering Roderick's borrowed cravats, ensuring his shoes were polished to a mirror sheen, and, most crucially, keeping a ledger of their dwindling funds, a ledger that grew more alarming with each passing day. The irony was not lost on Roderick. He was spending money he didn't have to acquire more money than he could ever imagine, all at the expense of his faithful, perpetually put upon barber surgeon. Yet, the vision of a life free from want, free from the indignities of poverty, spurred him onward, hardening his heart to the artifice of his pursuit. He was a hunter, and his quarry was wealth, disguised in silken gowns and bedecked with jewels that represented not affection but opportunity. His campaign was now fully launched, and the field of eligible, if often unsuspecting, heiresses lay before him. Chapter 15. Enter Narcissa after months of navigating the treacherous currents of London society, where every smile seemed to mask a mercenary motive and every gesture was a calculated display. Roderick Random had grown exceedingly weary. His experiences had hardened him, forging a shield of cynicism around a heart that, for all its misadventures, still harbored a youthful idealism. He had witnessed avarice cloaked in finery, deceit masquerading as wit, and affection bartered for coin. Each encounter had chipped away at his faith in human goodness, leaving him more inclined to expect perfidy than sincerity. He was, in essence, a man braced for disillusionment, keenly observing the folly and vice of the world with a jaundiced eye. It was amidst such a clamor of superficiality and calculated smiles that she first appeared, a vision utterly detached from the gilded mediocrity surrounding her. The very air in the assembly seemed to still, if only for a fleeting moment, as Narcissa stepped into the room, not with the calculated strut of a coquette, nor the loud pretensions of a titled dame, but with a quiet, unassuming grace that was, paradoxically, utterly arresting. Her beauty was not of the kind that clamored for attention, but rather a serene radiance that drew the gaze gently, compelling admiration without demanding it. Her eyes, Roderick would later recall, held a depth of understanding and a gentle kindness that seemed to wash away the accumulated grime of cynical observation he had worn for so long. She moved with an elegance that bespoke an inner harmony, untouched by the affected airs and strained vivacity that afflicted so many of the women Roderick had previously encountered. There was no artifice in her smile, no calculating glint in her gaze, nothing of the grasping self-interest or the frivolous vanity that defined the female acquaintances he had, by turns, admired, despised, or simply endured. She was a breath of fresh air in a stifling chamber, a clear spring in a landscape mudded by human failing. It was as if, for the first time, Roderick was beholding true virtue, not as an abstract ideal, but embodied in a living, breathing form. And in that instant, something shifted within Roderick. His customary defenses, so carefully constructed over years of hardship and betrayal, began to crumble. The sharp wit that served as his retort, the keen eye for weakness that informed his judgments, the guarded distance he maintained from all emotional entanglement, all dissolved in the face of her pure, unblemished presence. He felt, quite suddenly, a profound sense of his own unworthiness, a stark awareness of the rough edges of his character, the stains of his past struggles. A lump formed in his throat, and for the first time in memory, Roderick Random, the man of resilient spirit and unyielding self-preservation, felt utterly vulnerable. He was exposed not to danger, but to a feeling far more unsettling, a longing for goodness, an earnest, aching desire to be seen, truly seen, by her, and to be found deserving of her light. It was a feeling he had never known, a sudden, powerful revelation of true love, dawning amidst the ruins of his former cynicism. Chapter 16. The Marshalsea Prison. And so it was, that after navigating the treacherous currents of London's unforgiving streets, striving with every fiber of my being to stay afloat, I found myself finally capsized, dragged under by the very tide I fought so valiantly against. The knock came abruptly, a crude intrusion upon the meager peace of my rented room. Two burly figures, bailiffs by their grim countenances and even grimmer purpose, stood silhouetted against the pale morning light. My heart, which had endured so much, now plummeted to my stomach. The charge was debt, a paltry sum to some, but an insurmountable mountain to a man stripped of his means and connections. There was no argument, no reprieve. The law, unblinking and unfeeling, had found its mark. I was seized, a prisoner to my creditors, and thus began my unwilling journey to the notorious Marshalsea. The very gates of the Marshalsea seemed to exhale a sigh of collective despair. Within its formidable walls, a world entirely distinct from the bustling city outside revealed itself. This was a miniature society, a distorted reflection of England itself, but one where the currency was not guineas, but suffering, and the social standing dictated by the depth of one's destitution. Here congregated a motley assemblage, the once proud merchant, undone by ill-fated ventures, the earnest craftsman, whose tools now lay idle, his family adrift, the dissolute rake, whose excesses had finally caught up with him, and indeed, unfortunate souls like myself, ensnared by circumstance and the cold indifference of a world that offered no quarter. Life within was a constant negotiation with squalor and indignity. Every corner of the Marshalsea teemed with humanity, each face etched with its own story of ruin. The air was thick with the stench of unwashed bodies, stale food, and the heavy perfume of resignation. Yet, amidst this misery, a strange order prevailed. There were those who preyed upon the new arrivals, those who clung to their last vestiges of former status, and those who simply melted into the background, their spirits slowly dissolving with each passing day. It was a place where hope entered rarely and departed quickly, leaving behind only the bitter taste of reality. And therein lay the cruelest irony, the most profound despair of the debtor's prison. Imprisonment intended to force payment, effectively rendered payment impossible. How could one earn a living, much less repay a debt, when immured within these suffocating confines? It was a vicious, self-perpetuating cycle, a trap from which few truly escaped without the intervention of a miracle or the grave. The days bled into weeks, weeks into months, each sunrise bringing not renewed opportunity, but merely another iteration of the same bleak existence. Ambition, once a fiery spark, dulled to a smolder, then to ash. The future, once uncertain, now offered only the stark certainty of prolonged captivity. The Marshalsea was not merely a prison of stone and iron, it was a prison of hope itself, where the spirit, once buoyant, slowly but surely succumbed to the crushing weight of an endless, unpayable past. Chapter 17. The uncle's return. Roderick, having plumbed the depths of destitution and faced the callous indifference of a world that judged him by his empty pockets rather than his character, found himself once more adrift. His spirit, though battered, still flickered, but the path ahead seemed shrouded in an impenetrable fog of despair. It was at this most desolate juncture, in a cramped and squalid lodging house, that a most unexpected tempest burst into his life. The door, already precariously hung, was thrown open with a mighty crash, revealing a figure whose very presence seemed to fill the room with the tang of salt and gunpowder. This was Lieutenant Bowling, Roderick's maternal uncle, a man whose existence Roderick had almost forgotten, so long had he been absent from his young life. His features, weathered and etched with the adventures of the sea, held an undeniable air of command, even as his rumpled naval attire suggested a recent disembarkation. "Shiver my timbers, is this the scrawny cub they call Roderick?" Bowling's voice boomed, rattling the very window panes. He wasted no time with pleasantries, his gaze piercing through Roderick's wretched appearance. "Heard you've been running aground, boy. Heard those landlubber sharks have been gnawing at your stern. Well, a Bowling doesn't leave his own to founder." Without another word, he pulled a hefty purse from his coat, its clinking a sound sweeter than any symphony to Roderick's ears. "Here, lad, money for victuals, a decent berth, and a new rigging. And anyone who thinks to cross a Bowling, or a relation of a Bowling, will learn the sharp end of a cutlass, mark my words." His generosity, though gruffly delivered, was boundless, cutting through the layers of deceit and snobbery that had plagued Roderick. Bowling saw not a disgraced youth, but a kinsman wronged, and his loyalty was fiercer than any gale. He spoke with contempt of the powdered fops and scheming lawyers who had sought to strip Roderick bare, declaring their perfidy inferior to the honest brutalities of a sea battle. "There's more honor in a tar's oath than in all the fine speeches of your courts, boy," he declared, spitting contemptuously. "And a man's worth isn't in his silken breeches, but in the heart that beats under his waistcoat, whether it's a uniform or a tattered shirt." This sudden, powerful intervention was more than just financial aid. It was a profound affirmation of worth, a beacon in the storm. Lieutenant Bowling, with his rough hands and even rougher tongue, had, in a single decisive stroke, rescued Roderick from the precipice, ushering in a dramatic turn of fortune through the unwavering loyalty of family, a loyalty rooted not in societal niceties, but in the deep, unvarnished code of the sea. Chapter 18. Voyage to the West Indies. And so, after the trials that had so recently beset him, Roderick found himself once more upon the rolling deck of a ship, bound for the distant shores of the West Indies. This was no desperate flight, no involuntary impressment, but a conscious choice, a calculated gamble for a better future. He had secured a berth as surgeon's mate, a role he knew intimately, yet this time it felt different. The scars of his previous voyages, the injustices suffered, had not broken him but tempered him. He moved with a quiet authority born of hard-won experience, his medical skills now honed, his composure unshakable even amidst the rough and tumble of shipboard life. The captain, a pragmatic man, and the senior surgeon, a weary but fair individual, recognized in Roderick not just a competent assistant, but a resourceful and intelligent young man, affording him a respect he had rarely known before. The voyage itself was a kaleidoscope of the sea's changing moods, but the destination, the bustling ports of the West Indies, loomed large in the minds of all aboard. These islands, verdant and fertile, were also the epicenter of a trade that, however abhorrent to modern sensibilities, formed the very bedrock of the era's commerce. Our ship, like so many others, carried not only manufactured goods from England, but was also destined to play its part in the grim cycle of the transatlantic slave trade. Though Roderick's immediate duties mercifully kept him from the most direct involvement in such transactions. His focus, his burning ambition, lay elsewhere in the quiet, clandestine world of private trade. With a small sum garnered from his previous meager earnings and the goodwill of a few acquaintances, Roderick had acquired a modest consignment of English trinkets, small tools, and rolls of inexpensive fabric items he knew would fetch a premium in the colonial outposts. He bartered shrewdly with the crew, offered small medical services for a share of their own private ventures, and cultivated a network of informers among the sailors and marines who kept him apprised of potential buyers and market fluctuations. He meticulously kept his ledger, each transaction, no matter how small, a step towards the independence he craved. The ship's hold became his silent counting house, the ebb and flow of the tide a rhythmic reminder of the accumulating wealth he hoped to build. This was not merely commerce, it was a defiant act of self-reliance, a testament to his unyielding spirit, a voyage not just across oceans, but towards a destiny of his own making. Chapter 19. The discovery of Don Rodrigo. And so it was that after navigating the treacherous currents of fate, Roderick found himself in a bustling port town, a jewel in the Spanish dominions. Here whispers circulated of a grand and benevolent figure, a Don Rodrigo, whose immense wealth was matched only by his profound generosity and regal dignity. This man, a pillar of the community, dispensed justice and charity with an open heart. By a fortunate turn, Roderick found himself ushered into the formidable presence of this eminent Don. Roderick, ever observant, noted a profound wisdom and a gentle melancholy in the Don's esteemed features, an undeniable aura of power tempered by benevolence. As the Don, with a gaze that pierced his very soul, inquired into Roderick's origins and the winding path that had led him there, Roderick began his sorrowful tale. He spoke of his mother, his grandfather, his ignominious birth, and the father he believed lost to a shipwreck years ago. With each word, a profound transformation rippled across Don Rodrigo's face. His brow furrowed, his eyes, once calm, now glistened with unshed tears, and his long-held composure began to fray. A tremor ran through his frame as Roderick recounted a detail, a name, or a cherished memory known only to the closest kin. Then, in a voice choked with years of unspoken grief and sudden, overwhelming recognition, the magnificent Don Rodrigo interrupted. "My son!" he cried, the words tearing from his very soul. "My long-lost son! I am your father!" The world, for Roderick, spun to a halt. The revelation struck him with the force of a tidal wave, washing away years of hardship and a life spent adrift. The father he believed dead, whose absence had defined his tragedy, stood before him, alive, prosperous, and filled with an incandescent love. Don Rodrigo, it transpired, had been shipwrecked but miraculously saved, forging a new life and fortune under an assumed name, all while believing his family lost to him forever. The ensuing moments were a torrent of tears and embraces, a love so profound it seemed to heal every wound Roderick had endured. The missing piece of his soul, the validation of his existence, was restored. No longer the disgraced son or impoverished adventurer, he was Roderick Random, legitimate heir to a vast fortune, cherished son of a man of honor and renown. The burden of his arduous journey, the weight of his struggles, lifted like a morning mist, replaced by the warmth of family reunited, a destiny reclaimed, and a peace finally found. Chapter 20. Return to England. Gone were the days of humble passage, of seeking favor or enduring insolence. Roderick Random, now a man of profound consequence, embarked upon his homeward voyage not as a supplicant, but as a proprietor of vast fortunes. The vessel itself acknowledged his altered state, its opulent cabin a stark contrast to past deprivations. Boxes overflowing with treasure, bills of exchange representing estates untold, were stowed with meticulous care, each ounce of gold a testament to his perseverance, a formidable shield against misfortune. The Atlantic, once a daunting expanse of uncertainty, now felt like a majestic highway, carrying him swiftly towards a destiny he had so arduously carved. The salt spray upon his face, no longer harsh, was an invigorating tonic, mingling with the sweet anticipation of England's shores and his beloved's embrace. He was returning not just to a country, but to a life reimagined and resplendent. Upon his arrival, the very air vibrated with a newfound deference. The dusty docks of England, once so indifferent, now hummed with eagerness to serve. Customs officials, usually gruff, bowed with comical obsequiousness, their questions softened by palpable respect for his wealth. Innkeepers, who in his past offered a garret, now vied to present their most lavish suites, their smiles wide and service impeccable. Tradesmen, sensing a lucrative patron, offered their finest wares with fawning solicitation. He moved through bustling streets not as a lone wanderer, but as a figure of undeniable consequence, his presence commanding attention. Heads turned, conversations paused, a subtle ripple of recognition followed. The world, once eager to crush him, now hastened to smooth his path, cater to his every whim. It was a dizzying transformation, a stark demonstration of how deeply society's scales were weighted by the gleam of gold. But all the gold paled compared to the radiant hope within his breast. Narcissa. With a heart throbbing with trepidation and ecstatic certainty, he made his way to her familiar estate. The venerable old house, sentinel amidst verdant grounds, brought a lump to his throat. As he stepped from his carriage, a figure emerged, hesitant, then quickening with joyous disbelief. It was Narcissa, more beautiful than his fondest memories, her eyes widening with unspeakable wonder as she recognized the man before her, transformed by fortune, yet unchanged in devotion. Their eyes met, years of separation, hardship and yearning dissolved. He rushed to her, his arms encompassing her in an embrace that spoke volumes of trials overcome and dreams realized. Her tears mingled with his as he whispered promises of a future unbounded by want or fear, where their love, now liberated, could at last flourish. He had returned, not merely wealthy, but whole, and with the dearest prize of all. Chapter 21. Justice served fortune, that capricious mistress, had at last smiled upon Roderick Random with a dazzling benevolence, granting him not only affluence but the very means to reclaim his birthright. It was with a heart swollen with a mixture of anticipation and a quiet, steely resolve that I found myself, years after my ignominious expulsion, standing once more at the gates of my ancestral estate. But this time, I arrived not as a destitute orphan, but as a man of substance, a master of my own destiny, accompanied by an entourage befitting my newfound station. The once proud gates, I observed, hung slightly askew, their paint peeling, a testament to the neglect of those who had usurped my inheritance. The gravel drive, once meticulously raked, was now choked with weeds, and the grand old house itself seemed to sag under the weight of disrepair. My firm, resonant knock soon brought forth a figure I recognized, though time and hardship had etched new lines of worry upon his face. My cousin, a man whose sneering contempt had once been a constant torment. His eyes, at first registering mere annoyance at an unexpected caller, widened into disbelieving saucers as he finally recognized the man before him. His stuttering attempts at an apology, or perhaps a feigned welcome, were cut short by my cool, measured tone. I did not come for pleasantries, nor for a lengthy dissection of past injustices, though their memory burned bright. I am here, I stated, allowing my gaze to sweep over the decaying grandeur, to purchase what was once rightfully mine. I understand the estate is in arrears, and its current custodians find themselves in dire straits. The news of their financial ruin had reached me, a whisper of vindication carried on the winds of change. The very greed that had driven them to dispossess me had now, through their own mismanagement and extravagance, led them to the brink of ruin. Here was the bitter cup of poetic justice, served without my hand needing to lift a single sword. Their faces, pale with shock and despair, were a stark contrast to my calm determination. The swiftness with which the sale was negotiated, given their desperate circumstances, was almost comical. The very men who had conspired to strip me of my legacy now stood by, crestfallen and utterly defeated, as I, the very object of their disdain, signed the papers that returned the ancestral lands to the Random name. The ink on the parchment felt like a balm, a declaration of triumph not born of vengeance, but of a profound sense of justice finally administered. It was a reclaiming of honor, a restoration of a lineage nearly extinguished by malice and greed. As the last document was sealed, and the heavy, cold keys to my childhood home were placed into my hand, I felt a burden lift that I had carried since childhood. The ghosts of past wrongs, of a grandfather's cruel disinheritance, of cousins' petty tyrannies, seemed to dissipate like morning mist. The estate, my home, would now flourish under a benevolent hand, its halls echoing not with the whispers of injustice, but with the promise of a future reclaimed and rebuilt. The chapter of my torment was closed. The chapter of my rightful heritage, at long last, had truly begun. Chapter 22, the happy ending. At last, after a life fraught with peril and the caprice of fortune, Roderick Random stood on the precipice of true happiness. The day dawned crisp and bright, an auspicious omen for the most significant event of his tumultuous existence. The The air hummed with anticipation as Narcissa, radiant and utterly captivating, walked towards him. Her eyes, pools of devotion, met his, reflecting not just the morning sun, but the profound love that had weathered separation, destitution, and despair. The ceremony was everything they had dreamed of, an intimate gathering of steadfast friends. Vows were exchanged with a sincerity born of hard-won understanding, each word carrying the weight of past trials, and the boundless promise of a shared future. It was not merely a wedding, it was a jubilant declaration that true love conquers adversity. With blessings pronounced and rings exchanged, Roderick, a man of fortune and gratitude, claimed his beloved. With their past behind them, a new landscape of contentment unfolded. Their estate, a haven of tranquility, became the stage for their new life. Roderick embraced his role as squire with a gravity rarely seen in his restless days. Management of lands, welfare of tenants, the dignity of a settled life, these became his pursuits. But the lingering question, posed by our very chapter title, persists: had Roderick truly learned his moral lessons? Was this a genuine transformation, or merely a happy circumstance that quelled his wilder instincts? His journey was a crucible. Every misfortune, every betrayal, every brush with destitution had chipped away at the rougher edges of his character. He had been impulsive, self-serving, quick to anger. Yet his fundamental humanity, capacity for loyalty, and yearning for an honorable life had stubbornly endured. Now, with Narcissa's unwavering love as his compass, and the responsibilities of family and estate as his anchors, he was compelled to deeper introspection. Reckless gambits yielded to considered judgment, fleeting pleasures, to domestic joy. This was no sudden conversion, but the culmination of arduous experience. He had seen the folly of vice and the bitter fruits of dishonesty. He had transitioned, not just from poverty to wealth, but from a solitary individual to a man deeply interwoven with his community and the heart of his family. The rogue had indeed become the respected squire, not by donning a new mask, but by having his inner landscape reordered by life's relentless teachings. The happy ending, then, was not merely a cessation of troubles, but the hard-earned blossoming of wisdom and the tranquil peace of a soul finally at home. Welcome, fellow adventurers, to Chapter 7 7-Day Action Plan, the Random Resilience Protocol. In our journey through the tumultuous life of Roderick Random, we've witnessed a character battered by fate, yet remarkably unbroken. His story, far from being a mere historical curiosity, offers a surprisingly potent framework for navigating the unpredictable currents of modern existence. This isn't just about surviving, it's about thriving through the chaos, inspired by Roderick's own indomitable spirit. Let us distill his sprawling odyssey into a practical, actionable plan for your own life, commencing now. Hask Days 1 and 2 Embrace Chaos. To Roderick's life was a masterclass in misfortune. Shipwrecks, betrayals, false accusations, poverty, imprisonment, it was an unending barrage of bad luck. Yet, what truly defines him isn't the suffering, but his persistent refusal to be utterly destroyed by it. He accepted the reality of his predicament, mourned briefly perhaps, but then always looked for the next step, the next opportunity, however small. For us, in our often more controlled, yet equally uncertain modern world, the lesson is clear: life will throw you curveballs. Your carefully laid plans will occasionally unravel. The Random Resilience Protocol begins not with avoiding chaos, but by learning to gracefully, albeit begrudgingly, embrace it as an inherent part of the human experience. When misfortune strikes, acknowledge the frustration, feel the sting of disappointment, but then, like Roderick, pivot. Ask yourself, given this unexpected turn, what is my immediate, most practical next move? See each setback not as a definitive end, but as an unforeseen plot twist in your grand adventure. For these 2 days, practice this mindset. When a minor inconvenience or major challenge arises, pause, accept, and then proactively seek your next course of action, channeling Roderick's unyielding determination. Hask Days 3 and 4 Find your strap. Amidst the sea of scoundrels and fair-weather friends, Roderick was blessed with a steadfast companion, the loyal, good-hearted Strap. This barber-surgeon's apprentice, though often timid, was Roderick's anchor, his unwavering supporter through thick and thin. Strap's loyalty wasn't conditional, it was absolute. In an age of fleeting connections and curated online personas, identifying and cherishing true allies is more critical than ever. For these 2 days, reflect deeply: who are the Straps in your life? Who are the individuals who celebrate your triumphs with genuine joy and stand by you during your deepest valleys, offering not judgment, but unwavering support. These are your invaluable assets, your true wealth. Actively nurture these relationships. Reach out to them, express your gratitude, and crucially, be their strap in return. Offer your own unwavering support, a listening ear, or a helping hand without expectation. Quality over quantity reigns supreme here. One loyal friend is worth 1,000 superficial acquaintances. Invest your time and emotional energy wisely, just as Roderick, in his better moments, understood the true value of his faithful companion. Ashk's Days 5, 6, and 7. Skill stacking dusk Roderick Random, for all his misfortunes, was not merely a passive victim of fate. He was a survivor because he possessed a remarkable array of practical skills. His medical training as a surgeon, his command of Latin and French, even his experiences at sea, repeatedly pulled him from the brink. These weren't isolated talents, they stacked, creating a versatile individual capable of adapting to almost any environment. In our rapidly evolving modern world, the lesson is profound. Adaptability is king. For the remainder of this week, focus on skill stacking. Think beyond your primary profession. What practical skills, big or small, can you acquire or improve that could provide an unexpected advantage, open a new door, or simply make you more resilient? Could it be a new language, basic first aid, coding fundamentals, public speaking, effective negotiation, or even mastering a practical craft? Roderick's journey teaches us that diverse, practical capabilities are your ultimate safety net. The more tools you have in your metaphorical belt, the better equipped you are to not just weather the storm, but to steer your own course through it. These aren't just hobbies, they are investments in your future self, building a personal arsenal of competence that can turn adversity into opportunity, just as Roderick's surgical skills saved him time and again. And so, we conclude our 7-day action plan, the Random Resilience Protocol. By embracing chaos with an adaptive spirit, cherishing your loyal allies, and continuously stacking practical skills, you are not merely reading about Roderick Random, you are embodying his enduring spirit of resilience. Life will undoubtedly be random, but your response to it need not be. You now possess the blueprint to navigate its unpredictable waters, confident, prepared, and ready for your own grand adventure. As Roderick Random's tempestuous journey concludes, we reflect not just on his trials, but on the profound societal currents Smollett deftly exposed. His Picaresque adventures, while personal, offer a brilliant, biting critique of 18th century Britain. Let us distill this grand narrative into 3 enduring takeaways that resonate as powerfully today as centuries ago. First, the stark contrast between meritocracy and aristocracy. Roderick, a young man of undeniable intellect and skill, particularly in medicine, finds his path repeatedly obstructed not by lack of talent, but by his unfortunate birth and absence of powerful patronage. We witness competence and virtue subjugated by wealth, lineage, and connection. Smollett champions true worth transcending birth, portraying brilliance languishing while mediocrity thrives, shielded by inherited privilege. Random struggles highlight that genuine ability, though it finds footing, battles an aristocratic age. His triumph is a hard-won victory for the principle that talent does ultimately matter more than pedigree. Our second takeaway delves into the brutality of institutions. Smollett's satiric gaze exposes inherent institutional cruelty and corruption. The Royal Navy is depicted as a bastion of arbitrary power, filth, and suffering. The medical profession, Roderick's aspiration, is riddled with quackery and avarice. Even the legal system and societal conventions prove instruments of oppression for the unprivileged. This systematic questioning compels us to acknowledge injustices within seemingly legitimate systems. Roderick's constant defiance, his refusal to be broken, is a testament to the resilience required when confronting such formidable, unfeeling forces. Finally, we observe the relentless turning of the wheel of fortune. Roderick's life is a masterclass in reversals, one moment starving and destitute, the next enjoying fleeting comfort, only to be plunged back into despair. This cyclical nature of life's fortunes, the constant ebb and flow, is a fundamental truth Smollett explores. Roderick's ability to endure, to keep moving forward despite setbacks, underscores a vital message: life is unpredictable. Success is never permanent, nor is failure absolute. Perseverance is key, maintaining spirit even at the lowest point. His ultimate resolution, found after countless oscillations, reinforces that one must simply keep turning, keep striving, for the wheel is bound to turn again. Through these 3 lenses, merit, institutional power, and fortune's ceaseless rotation, Smollett gifts us a narrative rich in commentary and human truth. Roderick Random's adventures are more than one man's journey. They are a timeless mirror reflecting humanity's struggles against an indifferent world, urging us to question, strive, and persevere. And so, we leave Roderick, for a moment, on the precipice of yet another unpredictable turn in his extraordinary life. His journey, as you've heard, is a relentless series of trials, often revolving around the desperate search for a foothold in a world that seems determined to cast him adrift. We've seen him navigate the treacherous waters of employment, attempting to prove his worth in situations that would break a lesser spirit, enduring the whims of demanding masters, or the outright deceit of conniving superiors. He is, in essence, constantly interviewing for a place, a purpose, a future. This brings me to a thought, a shared human experience that I'm certain many of you can relate to, perhaps even more acutely than Roderick himself. Think back, if you will, to your own trials by fire. What is the single worst job interview you have ever had? Was it the interviewer's bizarre questions, an unexpected task, a humiliating oversight, or simply the crushing weight of utter despair? Did you, like Roderick, leave feeling more adrift than when you started? Perhaps even more bewildered by the strange currents of human interaction? Share your stories below. Let us hear the tales from your own unpredictable voyages in the professional world. Your experiences, I assure you, are just as compelling, just as vivid as any encountered by our unfortunate protagonist. Now, if these literary explorations, these deep dives into the heart of classic tales, bring a spark to your day, if they offer a moment of engaging reflection, then I ask you to consider joining our growing crew of literary adventurers. A simple like on this video, and perhaps a subscription to the channel, is the beacon that helps us navigate these waters. Your support, your engagement, is what allows us to continue bringing these incredible stories, these insightful breakdowns of seminal works like The Adventures of Roderick Random, directly to you. It's how we keep the sails unfurled and the narrative ship sailing onward, exploring more of the vast, rich ocean of classic literature. It's your way of saying, keep these stories coming. Your active participation truly makes all the difference. But the journey, my friends, is far from over. Roderick's Picaresque Odyssey continues, promising more scrapes, more close calls, more peculiar characters, and undoubtedly, more profound insights into the human condition. You certainly won't want to miss what happens next. The next chapter in Roderick's saga, or indeed, the next fascinating installment in our broader Picaresque series, awaits you just a click away. Simply follow the link in the description below, or click on the end screen that will appear momentarily to continue our shared adventure. The next port of call awaits, and I eagerly anticipate meeting you there, ready to delve once more into the heart of the story and all its glorious chaos. Until then, keep your wits about you, and may your own journeys be filled with discovery.